Dante the Inferno by Elliott Holtzman and Milutin. Dante Alighieri was born in 1265 in Florentine, Italy. Dante was considered a major Italian figure and the father of the modern Italian language. Dante was also a notable political theorist and statesman, but he is most famous for his poetry, in particular his monumental Divine Comedy, written during a 13-year span from 1308 to 1320. The poem describes Dante's journey through hell, purgatory, and heaven, and shows many of the poet's views of the time that he lived in. We will be closely studying the Inferno, or the passage through hell, to see how Dante's work is characteristic of that of the Renaissance.
To understand this, we must have a better understanding of the Renaissance. The Renaissance was a period of time succeeding the Middle Ages. Antiquity, the time period preceding the Middle Ages, is an era where art, beauty, and knowledge are valued. The Renaissance, which literally translates to rebirth, strives to bring back values such as those that they believe were lost during the Middle Ages. One very strong aspect of the Renaissance was the appearance of humanism. Humanism parts ways with the belief in the supernatural that appeared in the Middle Ages and asks us to use our own human logic and rational thinking like the philosophers of the antiquity. It also asks us to try and understand works of art and literature on our own, as well as come to our own conclusions. One important aspect of humanism was individualism. Individualism is a theory that believes in being yourself, not following orders, and not being forced to live your life a certain way. This totally opposes the belief preceding individualism. In the Middle Ages, what you did was based from whom you were. If you were a noble, you either were or served the Lord. If you were a member of the clergy, you were supposed to be the religious leader of your community. If you were a serf, you served a noble, and if you were a peasant, you were part of a manor which is based around community and not individuals. On top of all this, the church, arguably the most powerful institution in the Middle Ages, clearly disagreed with individualism. They thought that it showed greed and it was sinful. This movement away from the church is called secularism. People in the Renaissance were still very religious, but religion was less and less vital to life than it was in the Middle Ages.
In the Inferno, hell is divided into 9 circles, which are themselves divided into different pits and rings. The story itself is rather simple. Dante, lost in a dark forest, is starting to despair when he finds Virgil. The poet then guides him through the circles of hell, from least to most sinful, through the center of the earth before coming out from the other side. The Inferno is a fascinating glimpse at Dante's views of the world and the people, and is considered a masterpiece of literature. Here are some of the main highlights of the work. The first circle of hell, also called limbo, is reserved for those who do not believe in God, but who do not commit any serious sins. They do not endure any form of physical punishments, but rather cannot feel happiness as they are without God. In limbo, we find artists such as Homer, Ovid, Horace, or Virgil. However, these people aren't only artists, they are classics, the very people whom the society of the Renaissance respected deeply. It is important to remember, however, that these artists are in hell, which shows that Dante considered religion to be more important than art. On the other hand, we sense that Dante has great admiration for these artists, especially Virgil, who he makes his tour guide of hell. This shows an example of conflicting views that religion could bring upon the people of the Renaissance. Another interesting point about hell is the fact that liars were placed in the 8th circle, right before the pit of hell itself, and well beneath more destructive sins such as suicide or violence. In the 14th century, oaths and omens were considered to be some of the most sacred acts, and accordingly, those who broke them were considered to be some of the most sinful people. Incidentally, violent acts were likely to be considered more acceptable and part of the norm, as Dante places them in the 5th and 7th circles, respectively. But the most sinful act of Dante's times was considered to be betrayal, more particularly betrayal of one's government and country. This shows the immense importance that Dante accorded to politics and one's civil service. In effect, 2 of the 3 sinners in Satan's map, at the center of hell, are Cassius and Brutus, who killed Caesar and betrayed their country in a single act. During his lifetime, Dante was exiled from Florence and is likely accusing the politicians who threw him out. Another notable fact is that the betrayal of one's family was considered to be one of the lesser evils, even though it was still in the 9th circle. Obviously, the most sinful act possible was the betrayal of God, demonstrated by the fact that the man in this very center of earth was Judas, who betrayed Jesus to the Romans. While it was less of an influence than in the Middle Ages, religion still played a big part in the Renaissance arts, as shown here.
The Inferno inspired works in the Renaissance and beyond. At the time, Dante's poem was considered factual, and many scientists tried to determine what size hell really was. It also inspired many artists of the time, such as Sandro Botticelli, who drew up a map of hell, but also more recent ones, like Salvador Dali, who illustrated Dante's journey through hell. The impact is still large today, with video games such as Dante's Inferno and various movies referencing the Inferno.
We all hope that this literary experience was instructive to you and your peers.
Are you kidding me?
Thank you.
We can cut that.